Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. So, I think we'll start with brief introductions. My name is Kristen Darcy. I'm CMO of True Religion. How many people have heard about True Religion in the last 6 months? Okay,
Oh, an honest room. I like an honest room.
right? So, I have some work to do then in terms of awareness and consideration. Thank you guys very much. We're really excited to be here today and to talk about 2024 trends, tips, what we think is on your minds. But I would like to introduce my co-panelists here first. Let's start with Joseph.
Hey guys, great to meet you. Joseph Dressler. I'm the head of sales for a company called Adform. Adform is a purpose-driven DSP and really full stack built out of Europe. So data privacy, giving data back to you as brands is our number one priority. Jason?
Jason Oates, co-founder of LiveIntent and chief business officer. LiveIntent still the only email ad server, DSP, and SSP for inventory in email newsletters, alerts, and announcements sent by both brands and publishers. And since we're reaching about 270 million people every month in North America, it puts us as like top 4 or 5 logged in audience in North America. And from this information, we're moving into a lot of identity services and customer insights and audience insights.
Great. Okay, so let's dive right in. I think as somebody who started their career on the agency side, I hate to admit, I think it's over 20 years ago. And then I've been on the brand side for the last 13. The following question has persisted, throughout that decade or so. And it's really, will client-side marketers in-house more, less, or the same in the future?
Can I be like my daughter and just answer yes? Right? Choose one. Yes. That doesn't help. That doesn't help me at all, honey. So, the question's an interesting one for all the brands who are out there. I'm sure many of you think about this and talk about it internally. And for us, what I've seen consistently is really less about the question of services and more a question about the data ownership. And so there are a bunch of brands I've spoken to recently who have really made the effort of signing their own tech partnerships, but still outsourcing the work to agencies. So meaning if you think about the level of personnel, employment, hiring, specialty that's needed to bring all the agency and technology services in-house, there's a lot that goes along with it. But having the technology contracts under your own gives you all the data rights and ownership. And I know something Jason and I believe very heavy in is that you as a brand need to own your own data to make your best decisions possible. So I think to answer your question directly, I think yes, the answer is you'll see more of a trend of in-housing, but let's not use the term in-housing to mean everything will come in-house. Certain parts will come in-house. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I started my career in 96 at DNB.
You're not supposed to age yourself on the stage.
Not that far away from here. So, and why I bring it up is that I feel like there's always been a time for agencies to really work out. It was easier back then because there's more margin. It's easier to innovate and do that. But I think since then, one of the issues that has challenged agencies is it's a race to the bottom in terms of margins. It is harder for them to become technologies and to invest. And therefore, I think that when it comes to newer technologies, it makes sense for brands to work directly with vendors. But then as it becomes stable and winners really clearly start to emerge in something new, and I think agencies are really good at coming in, or unless there's new agencies. Remember when agencies weren't doing anything around Facebook, it became Facebook agencies that actually did that. And that's where I think that maybe makes sense, where there's an emerging kind of agency that's handling something new. They are experts at it, and that can be really helpful to brands.
And I think from my perspective, slightly different. I don't know that it's a one-size-fits-all answer. There are some brands that I've been with over the years where, at least on the agency side, no agency, nobody from the outside could quite understand the DNA of a brand as we lived it and breathed it every day. So again, this is a long time ago, but Ralph Lauren would be a great example of that. We would bring in outside partners if we needed execution. Let's say when we did a light show on the outside of the mansion. Yes, that did happen when the mansion opened on Madison. But it was really difficult for anybody else to understand, again, unless you were living and breathing every day. What I think is so interesting now, years later, is looking at outside tech resources, to both of your points, and understanding that you can't always do it by yourself. So owning your own data, and I know we're going to talk about identifiable audiences in a moment, but owning your own data, yes, to be able to execute on it, But when I look around, sometimes there's just not enough resources within the brand to be able to pull off the tremendous amount of growth that these companies need you to do.
And I think what you're also saying is like we live in an instant gratification society, right? But if you're a brand trying to in-house, you can't imagine that you're just going to snap your fingers, not only have a full tech stack, not only have full teams that are going to do the work you want them to, but Kristen, your point about culture, right? Understanding the brand ethos and what it stands for, that does not come overnight, right? And I know you're trying to build that right now.
Definitely. Okay, so we started to talk about emerging trends. When you think about marketing technology trends, what do you think are going to be most influential in the future, and how do you think they're going to be reshaping brands' marketing strategies?
I think that we've been talking about the cookie apocalypse for quite a long time, and it's going to start, sometime in January, the beginning of 2024. I think that really does change things quite a bit. Many brands are already looking at alternatives, and there's a lot of strange bedfellows looking to replace the third-party cookie. But I think that's fundamentally a massive shift in the way people think about, marketing online. If identity is lost on the web, everything will look like TV, and we'll just be out there buying against the total audience of some publication. But that is changing, and what we are feeling really comfortable now is there will be ways of resolving identity in pretty much all channels, but especially the web. So you're not running blind, so you can do attribution, so you can actually follow people across multiple channels and manage frequency and performance. And I think that's, so the companies that are actually allowing that to happen, I think will be the companies that continue to grow and survive. And those that don't are, I think, are gonna struggle.
I hate with the Me Too answer, but I mean, there's no doubt identity is critical. But I think it's critical on two levels. One is we see roughly 46% of the open web today is cookieless. So meaning the standard way we're all used to advertising or marketing against them, 54% of people, 46% of people, right, you can't actually get to effectively. And Jason and I were chatting about this before. What's great for brands, though, is when you find a technology partner who can, right, you're bidding in a less sophisticated environment, which means actually you're going to get more efficiency from it. And so my ask of everyone in the room is you're going to hear everyone in the world talk about they have their own solutions, right? My ask of every brand here is challenge us as technology vendors, really challenge us, not just the marketing speak, not just the great PR. There's some amazing PR companies out there who make everything sound wonderful. Really challenge us with, show me how you do it, right? Let me see the raw data that I can do my own analyzation for to know that you're getting a product that solves your needs, right? Whether it's Jason's company, my company, 100 companies, lots of them do have good products, but they're not all right for everyone at every time. Very similar to Kristen's question earlier about in-housing, right? It will look and feel different. The same thing about identity, right? That's my real ask of you guys.
So based on solutions such as yours and the evolution of targeting to make sure that consumers are as identifiable as possible, how does the consumer journey look different today than it did 5 years ago with the way that you can engage with them?
So I think it goes back to two or three parts. The first part, really critical, is being able to understand all the different paths of your journey, right? Jason talks about this really well. There's at least 3, if not 4 different stages of the consumer life cycle, right? And it's really important in general, right? We talk about the ABCs of marketing, that you're not telling the same story to every consumer, right? You have very good loyal consumers, you have very good discounted consumers, right? And you have everyone kind of in the middle. How you engage with them is critical. And so being able to bucket, being able to know where they are and where they're engaging with you, and really where are they engaging in general, right? Or your audience is more TV, web, mobile, social, etc. Understanding that flight pattern of your consumer really can add value. Jason, I know you have a really deep answer you want to go into here.
Yeah, I think that, and you'll probably hear me, say it over and over again. I think that having one view of the customer as often as possible is going to be super helpful, and especially in that cookieless world. So, when you are, and we also realize there's a lot of brands in here that maybe are just doing branding and don't have first-party data. I think there's room on both sides. But capturing that, understanding who somebody is across multiple different IDs, and then being able to pick them up as they're actually surfing different platforms, and then understanding maybe even sequential messaging and like giving them the right, the right information at the right time, but also suppressing information. Like if someone is a new customer and they're on that journey, why are you showing them so much advertising? Why are you showing them offers for 25% off first purchase? Like really know where they are in that journey and treat them well within that portion of the journey and suppress other stuff. That's why I think one of the bigger issues that we'll maybe get into later is silos. The silos between the acquisition team and the retention team are ridiculous. They're actually stunting the growth of these large companies every day. And so part of what we end up doing is just going in and consulting and actually getting them to know each other, to actually respect what each other does and figure out how they can actually work together. That's really the only way I think the journey can be successful. And then on top of that, I think that there needs to be new signals that are incorporated into marketing. When you think about, I do a lot of advertising, but also retention and reactivation. And what I'm noticing is that, often, so when you think about, CRM, if Apple's opening up 40% of your mail every single morning, you can't really use opens as a barometer for activity. And so then people will say, okay, what can I see within my owned and operated, properties? Well, probably not that much when you consider the life of that person online. So maybe what we should be doing is leveraging the signals from digital advertising marketing on the web and in app and in email to understand who's truly active. What are they really interested in right now? And how can I use this information to communicate with this person better? So using signals far outside of your owned and operated properties, and then leveraging those signals in both, I think, acquisition, retention, and reactivation, which I'll get into more later.
When Jason talks about signals, right, again, back to an earlier comment, make sure you're getting that data back from your ad tech partners, right? Again, that is your data to understand how to learn, optimize, and personalize your messages. Sure, we're the technology that allows that to happen. Of course, that's true. But you should be very much in the decision-making process. And when your vendors are not giving it back, you have a blind spot to any sort of segmentation you're going to be doing.
Well, collectively, that's how we're all going to compete against, Facebook and Google and Amazon. I mean, I think, if they continue to win, traditional publishers lose. Like, I want Better Homes and Gardens and All Recipes and Epicurious and New York Times and Washington Post, and I want them to survive. Some of the best editors in the world, and I just don't want to follow, don't follow me and listen to what I have to say. Like real editors, people that really care, that know how to write and add context and aren't lying about stuff. And so we need to actually figure out how to make them survive. How we do that is through better understanding of who customers are. But the sharing back of data, when you say that, and we've always talked about, we've worked together for years and years, it's their data.
Yes, correct.
There's enough black box happening out there. The more data you can give to people, that's actually, and then helping them understand how to use it, instead of just dumping it over and be like, oh, this should be wonderful for you. But what are we going to do with it? So you have to actually add the consulting on top of it. And when you do that, now you learn all sorts of stuff that you didn't know.
Yep.
And so it's a flywheel. I think it just keeps on learning.
I did think for a second you were going to try to promote Riff here, your band.
I do think your point on data is an interesting one. It's the what, but then it's the how. How are you actually using it?
Yeah.
And what are the insights that you can glean, and how can you pivot as a result of what you learn? But I think back, I was at Coty, 76 at the time, brand beauty company. There was only one brand that was e-commerce enabled. And so our owned and operated channels actually were not. We sold through everything from Boots in the UK to Macy's to Nordstrom to Walgreens. So what do people do if you think about the CPG industry, Unilever and P&G? What if the data is not necessarily theirs to own? How does that change this conversation?
Well, that brings up a really good point. I mean, one thing that I find really interesting is that, on our exchange, we've got 3,000 publishers, all email, both from brands and publishers. The beauty category is dominated by small CPGs and beauty companies. I don't even think we have one major, Fortune 500 beauty brand. And the reason is they've got bias. They've actually created a set of rules that make it impossible for them to go into an industry. Because, I'll be really honest, like one specific kind of instance is large CPG companies that have to use their viewability tags that don't work in non-JavaScript environments. You're going to cut out the entire email channel, which is all first-party data, where we know exactly who those audiences are, and you're going to give it all to the smaller, competitors. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I think they have to open up to new channels and get rid of some of the bias or old thinking that's really going to stunt their growth. When you think about cookies going away, where are they going to go? We'll resolve identity in other places, but go to these areas where cookies aren't important anymore because it's all first-party data. And it's not just, say, LiveIntent. Morning Brew, 1440, there's all sorts of companies that we don't work with that are in this business. They all deserve, I think, some budgets from these larger companies.
Kristen, the underscore of your question also is interesting because you mentioned the idea about data, right? And I think many people in here, and Jason, you brought it up, many people in here probably think about the CRM list as your data, right? And a Unilever and a Coke, they're trying to build those things out, but obviously they're not the direct seller of their products. But when I think about data, it's the results of the campaigns is the primary part. Of course, the holy grail is your own CRM, but even when you're working through retail media, like you mentioned before, right? Whether you're a large store like a Walmart or a Target or a Kroger's, or you're a mid-sized retailer at AdWeek, there's somebody called Hy-Vee, which unless you're from the Midwest, you wouldn't know it, right? They're a big size grocer in the Midwest, right? I'm not advocating that they should, of course, give you the raw first-party data and be like, oh, here's my audience with all your information, go to town, have fun. But when you're running a campaign through them, through their retail media channel, either on-site or off-site, that's the data that can still teach you a lot. Right? And you can figure out how to segment your audiences based off purchase habits. So when Hy-Vee says someone buys Oreos 3 times a week, and you market to them and you realize they're only buying Oreos 1 time a month, there's a disconnect there, right? But you have a right to know that information and connect all the dots. You might not know it's Joe Dressler. That's fine, right? But you can build all the right segments that are appropriate. So I think in retail media, I would advocate for anybody who's in it today, having spent a few years in it myself, is one, don't get caught up in the hype of on-site. Right? And if you do, challenge your retail partners about incrementality for offsite. Right? Sponsored search is great, but are you literally just marketing to someone who is about to buy your product anyway in position 2, and you got it in position 1? Right? I can tell you from the math I've seen, there is less than 1% difference in those scenarios. Now, new products that you bring all the way up, that makes complete sense. Right? New products always need help. So think about those aspects of again, what level of data you deserve to get back, and more importantly, what's the incremental value in the offerings that you're doing?
And I guess only then can you decide whether or not to spend more money within that channel. But perhaps a slightly different question, can you succeed if you don't spend money with a retail media network?
Well, that has political ramifications, not Republican and Democrat, but that has lots of political ramifications to it. Having now sat on all 3 sides of that equation, can you succeed? It is really hard to succeed if you do not.
I'd say no.
Right? It's really, really hard to succeed if you do not, because there's 3 things that'll happen. 1, the retailer will not punish you per se, but they will not help you. Right? And they won't help you with in-store activities. They won't help you with their own online activities. And they won't help you with where your new products are going. And that's critical to your success if you're a brand that works with a retailer. I think that's part 1. And then part 2 is we continue to harp on the idea that it's your data as much as anything else. They will not share anything back with you, nor will you get any learnings from it. So I think those 2 things are critical. And Jason, you're probably right. The answer is no. I was going to go with the 1% of it's very, very hard, which is really Jason's answer of being no. But feel free to add anything else that you wanted to.
No, I think that the reality of things is we are moving forward, towards that different approach to understanding identity. And as cookies go away, it's inevitable. It's already happened. The reason why Facebook, Google, and Amazon are so powerful is because it's all logged in data. It's all first-party data, always. They know exactly who they're targeting and why and how it's working. That's why they're successful. So the more that we actually move into that space and understand that space and take some of the power away from them and actually put that power somewhere else, I think that's actually really helpful. And why not give it to retailers? Why not give it to publishers and allow them to do their job and help these big brands? So even when the brands aren't collecting first-party data, it's those that do, that understand the data, they're going to create a better ad environment, for the brands.
Okay, so let's pivot to a topic that I know we're only day 1 of AdWeek, but I'm sure not only will we hear about this 10 times today, but hundreds of times over the next couple days. AI. We'll sort of start at the 50,000-foot view. Yay or nay?
How can you not say yay? It just depends on, again, like data, how you use it. I'll give you guys 2 quick stories. I think we'd all be silly to not say that AI will make us more efficient in what we do. There are lots of menial tasks that we've been testing at Adform by not having people do them. So running basically Excel sheets, if you will, making the equations come to life quicker, thinking about different ways of testing marketing phrases, right? We can get 50 of them off the bat and then figure out which one's working much quicker. But really, in a real life environment, I'm a big fan of examples. So one of our tools is a dynamic creative optimization tool. Great. One of the things that we've done with an agency in Canada, Karen's O'Neill, is we ran an AI-driven DCO. So that's a lot of letters all put together. DCO, again, is dynamic creative optimization. AI, you guys all know, is artificial intelligence. And what we did was the advertiser created the shell of the campaign, but the call to actions were being generated by AI. And then we used our optimization engine to figure out which ones were working and not. So it was a much more efficient way of getting calls to action. It was a great 360 of the data we saw from optimization we passed back, right? And then we were able to even set up, based off customer segments, different AI-generated calls to action, right? And so that was a really good example of seeing a massive lift, forget just in awareness, but actual conversions, because people in different segments, both politically, geography, socioeconomic, every way you can imagine, the AI was able to help figure out what was the right messaging to them specifically.
And that actually ties back to the point of personalization. So I love that example.
Yeah, I think it's, so I'm definitely a yay when it comes to at least marketing and technology world. I think it's got some dangerous repercussions in other places, but I think AI is just an extension of consciousness, and so I think it's going to help us and take away some of the jobs that may be cluttering our brains with other things and allow us to think at a higher level about other things. And I think that's what technology always affords us to do. As it pertains to things that we're looking at, where we're using AI, obviously in ad serving, leveraging machine learning and AI. But I think the bigger step is actually around intelligence around audiences, people, and email as a piece of that. So what do I mean by that? So recently, one of the things that we started doing was actually taking a look at things like dormant email reactivation, customer reactivation, win back. Why? Because a couple of years ago, we just got inundated by a lot of companies, publishers, and brands saying, we need growth. We need absolute first-party data growth. Why? Cookie apocalypse is coming. We need to actually create a graph. And at the center of the graph, we need first-party data to authenticate all of those IDs. Like, okay. You can't afford to do that. You can't afford to actually buy 10 million new subscribers. That's just not going to work. And if everyone does it, there's no way. The prices are all going to go up. It's just not going to work. I put my way back hat on. I was like, how many people do you have in your dormant list? And what we learned is any business over 6 years, their dormant list was as big, if not 20 times bigger than their active list. I was like, there's what we can go mine. But the problem with that is there's no way of identifying which 20% of that database is really worth going after, so we can ignore the rest of it and actually get good deliverability, great, kind of response rates with low complaint and good deliverability. So we started actually thinking, so now how do we do that? So we actually started looking at all of the signals, both in email, on the web, and applications. And the number one thing that drove performance is who's really, truly active right now. That was the most important thing. Who is all over their email, all over websites, all over apps, making purchases. That became the number one driver. And so then we started adding in relevance and a bunch of other things. So basically what we were doing is taking in these databases of anywhere from 1 million to 100 million people, scoring all the data and telling people who to engage with per day. Talk to these people. These are the people that are super active today, interested in these things. And then the AI actually uses the signals coming off of the owned and operated properties, so we're not always making the same recommendations. The recommendations are tailored for that brand in that interest group, selling that product. And so that's where I think the humans would be much too hard for us to come up with all the scenarios and testing. So it's an ever-evolving scoring system where we're using AI to actually tell us, ooh, this is a segment that's actually really interesting. Here's where activity and this relevance score are really important and combined to figure out who has the highest propensity to interact with your brand right now. So that's one area. And then the other area is simple things like subject line creation, using AI to do, who wants to do that job? Raise your hand if you really want to write subject lines on a regular basis. I mean, it's a bag of hammers, right? So take that kind of stuff out of place, like, all right, let the AI figure that out, and then we'll do all the testing, and we'll do that. So get rid of the crappy jobs.
But a bag of hammers is good if you have another bag of nails
It's
somewhere.
true. If everything's a nail, like, yeah.
Dad jokes.
Dad joke number one.
I am interested, and we should talk afterwards actually, because your first example about email, and from what I understand, if you were able to make the active list more hyper performing to then drive more sales and efficiency versus trying to reactivate those that are lapsed is fascinating. Who wouldn't want to try to do that? You're basically
Yeah,
It's a
that's
trick
that
question.
many, but I guess
and this is not a softball.
if
It's
you only
great.
have
It's a
one
great
product
answer.
that you're selling, I think it becomes a little bit more difficult. But if you've got hundreds of thousands or millions of actually active customers, there's only a certain your top 20% drive 80% of your revenue. Top 20 to 30, it's very consistent across the board. So by scoring everybody, you could actually say, who the heck are these 15% that you've never seen online? You've never seen in their inbox, they're nowhere to be found. Can we just stop mailing them, save some money, and boost response rates and help deliverability? Yes. What about the top 10%, top 20% that are active everywhere, making purchases? They can get probably more mail. Let's upsell and cross-sell them into other products. Like those folks have a huge tolerance because they're digital first and hyperactive. So, and then on top of it, adding things like where are they most active in terms of IAB categories, and what are the demographics, and feeding that data in on a regular basis. Now they can make much more intelligent decisions.
Yeah.
So I think it's fun. It works.
It's great. So we talked a lot about sort of right now and near future. How about future-proofing strategies for the next 10 years? And I think from the brand perspective, what I always try to balance is how are you building the brand for the long run, but you also need to make sure that you're driving a sale 5 minutes ago. So what would your advice be for future-proofing strategies for marketers?
I love when the easiest question is the last one. I appreciate that, Kristen. I'm a big fan. I know I mentioned my daughter before, but it's literally how I try to teach her to live life and think about her schooling is have a vision for where you want to be, but then build the plan for how you're going to get there. Because none of us, like I mentioned with the in-housing, you cannot snap your fingers and get to the future. This industry we all live in is unfortunately too complicated, right? And likely to get more complicated, not less. And so I would say things like what is most important to your brand and your consumers, right? Because your brand is likely nothing without your consumers. What's most important to them to be loyal, to continue to shop with you, to increase their shopping habits over the next 2, 3, 4 years? Not all of that, of course, is marketing. And then if you look back at your marketing opportunities, what are the things needed to get there, right? We've brought up this term obviously many times before. We know the cookie's going away at some point, whether it is next year or the year after. Somebody can ask Google and figure out what their final decision will be. But the reality is, and Jason brought this up before, almost 50% of all open web traffic today is already cookieless. So we're there, right? That's definitely one thing. How do you tie identity and optimization back together so you understand the groups of personas that you have, right? We all market to personas. One day we might actually market to people, but that's a whole different level at the individual level. So today we're marketing to personas. And then again, what does your consumer need to be friendly to the brand? It's amazing, Jason brought this up before, how many brands we see market to consumers in a flat way versus a dynamic way, right? And I would say when you think about how you future-proof, don't think about the technologies. I'm not here to say, my guys, bet on this stock in 3 years because this is the one that's going to win it for us. Like we all know that's way too complicated. But think about the core business and have a plan that gets you to the end result you want to, which I know it seems really bland, but it's not when you go back and you sit with your partners in your rooms. And as you start to write it out, it becomes really easy to see that vision of where you want to be in the future.
Damn good answer, Joe. I don't know what can I possibly.
That's why I went
what
first.
Can I
I knew what I was
possibly
doing.
add to that? You did it again. I think
Ditto.
I think just an overriding feeling I often have is just treating people like a friend, not as a user, not as just a consumer, but a friend, someone that you actually care about. Which means that sometimes you have to allow people to move on, but you're continuously learning and allow that customer, allow that friend to evolve over time. Why do people break up or why do people fall away? It's because they don't allow people to change and don't allow them to evolve into a different person and to be there. But that takes listening, and that takes actually curiosity. and allow people to actually change, like if you have very finite or small consumer states and you'd love to shove people into these little, in consumer states or something like that, it doesn't always help, So I think that a big piece of it is just really listening, understanding where the consumer is, and evolving the way that you communicate with them over time. I think that's actually one important. And in order to do that, again, you have to know who they are. It's really hard to actually, if someone walks into your store, like think about the store that you walk into all the time, where you walk in, they know your name, they already have, something, to show you or whatever it is. And imagine, a world where you're working with a brand over and over again, and they keep treating you like a stranger over and over and over again. It's like, know who the hell I am and where I am in this process. I just bought those jeans. Show me the shirt that goes with it. I just bought that car. Show me the upgrade. Like, help me. Like, be that person that's guiding me along the way, not treating me like a stranger every time you see me.
So Jason, you want to be in a place where people always know your name.
Yeah, it's like Cheers, man.
And
it's like being in this room.
They're always glad you came.
Exactly.
So what I'm hearing is have a plan, know where you want to go, what the destination is, and then back into the tactics that help you get there. And while you're doing that, make sure you know the name of everybody in the car and what they like from a value exchange perspective, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. I think we want to leave on the following question. If you had to give folks in the room one takeaway from this conversation, the last 20 or so minutes, so that they're thinking about this as they go into their offices next week and can action on the great conversation that you guys had here, what would that be?
Let me go first. You sure? Yeah. All right. Happy to go first. I think my answer is an easy one, and it's not going to be anything we talked about today, but tied entirely to what we talked about today. Try to make sense of that for a second. So I said many times before, the ad tech space is unfortunately very complicated, right? And there's a lot of great marketing and PR that's out there that makes solutions sound more wonderful than they are. It's the joy of the world that we live in. My ask of you guys is find a few partners who you not only trust, but you feel are good educators or professors for you. I don't mean professors in like in a derogatory way. I mean really people who can help you. People you trust to ask a question, to be like, hey, I'm going through this. I've talked to these 3 companies. You don't need to hire consultants to do this. And I share this because at least I have a personal passion for literally doing things like that. How do I break down the complicated into simple? And I don't envy the position that many people in the room being brands are on, because I know you get hundreds of emails a day that unfortunately use AI, that no one's actually behind, right? I tell my team not to do that. It drives me crazy. I'd rather have us send out less emails that are more personalized. Many of you still don't open them or respond. Different story by itself. But seriously, find a few partners who you can trust. There's so many different categories. And work with them and ask them about how do they translate the trends that are happening today into more simplistic terms, so you don't feel like you're being marketed to, you're actually being worked with. That's my advice for everyone.
That's great.
Beautiful. I'm gonna kind of stick to the themes that I've been talking about, because I think just add something at the very end. The way that I feel about it, and I do err on the side of working closely with brands that do carry on a lot of first-party data. I think direct relationships with people. We learned during COVID it was extraordinarily important to actually have a relationship with your customer and still serve that customer no matter how they want to be served. Whether they want to go to a store, great. I do like going to stores, and I am back into stores. But actually, when it comes down to it, I just want the product. I want the product now, and I'd like to be able to actually figure out ways of getting it, right away. And then working with vendors that actually help connect you to your customer in a deep way. Giving that data back, helping enhance the understanding of where this consumer is in their process, help understand how to actually guide them towards the next step, in their journey with you, or outside. Maybe if you don't have the product, actually having relationships with other companies, and maybe actually making it easy for this customer to cross over and go somewhere else that's not competitive. When you think of publishers or advertisers, they're learning a lot from publishers. That's why retail media has been so great. If I'm selling these products, but you're not buying anything, how about this? How about something else that's not my product, but I have this audience that's actually really loyal to me and interested. They're not interested in buying my product right now, but using AI or machine learning, saying, well, what about this? Actually, everything based on I know, you're actually, prime candidate for, this product. So brands actually working, more like publishers, but then actually working with other companies and sharing audiences and finding new ways of discovering audiences through non-competitive relationships with other brands. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Kristen, what about you?
I have a slightly different answer. This conversation has been really exciting. And on the one hand, you could look at it as the art of the impossible or the art of how do you start tomorrow. I think my advice when everybody goes back next week is start with the basics. If you don't have your building blocks down, if you don't know how you are going to use a technology that you're bringing in, and the example I give is sometimes I join these organizations and they have Ferraris of tech solutions, and yet nobody can drive stick. And I look at this and I'm like, wow, we are not even using, a fraction of the capability that is available. And so when I take a look at that, I say either we have somebody internally that can help us unlock all of the great data and then turn it into insights, or if I don't, then I go back to that partner and I say, we need managed services, because otherwise it's literally just sitting here. And that ties back to our first question about in-housing, actually. So my advice would just be make sure that you have the basics down, even if they're not super sexy. We were talking about this earlier, because then that will set you up to succeed when you're ready to take the next step and do some of the things that were talked about up here today.
What a wonderful moderator. Bring it all back full circle at the end. That was phenomenal. Nice job, Kristen.
Nailed it.
My hype guy over here. I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.